Be'ezras Hashem Yisparach Erev Shabbos Kodesh Parashat Shoftim Shanas Tov Shion Pei Beis. They say over about the judge that always used to take bribes. And this judge, how it worked was, the person would put the bribe in his slippers. So when he would come to the courtroom, he'd take off his shoes and put his feet in the slipper. And if let's say he felt money, he felt an envelope in the right slipper, then he knew he has to favor the people standing on the right. And if he felt money in the left slipper, then he knew he has to favor the people standing on the left. That's the way this man, the custom was of this judge, how he would take the bribes. So one day he comes into the court case, takes off his shoes, he puts his feet in the slippers, and he feels in the right there's something there. So he presides a case in favor of the people standing in the right. But then when he comes home, he takes a slipper home, he takes it home, he sees an envelope. He opens up the envelope and he sees it's empty, there's no money inside. And he says the people nowadays, they're so corrupt, they're such liars. This is what he was saying, and the man who takes bribes in his court case. This week's parsha opens with the inyan of Shoftim v'Shoitrim, the inyan of being true and just judges. And the halacha says as follows, in the second pasuk in the parsha, it says, Lo yisatem mishpot. Do not swing the case in favor for one of the parties. V'lo yisikach shoichad, and do not take briberies from any of the parties. Says Rashi, Lo yisikach shoichad, don't take bribery even if you plan on giving a just verdict. Even if you're planning to giving a just verdict, nevertheless, don't take money from any of the parties. We have like two psukim. The first halacha is lo yisatem mishpot. That's an outright lie. Don't favor and do not pervert the justice to this one side. But the other halacha, lo yisikach shoichad, is teaching me to as well, even if you're planning to give a just verdict, nevertheless, do not take money from any of the parties. The source of this halacha is brought in Gemara Ksubas Daf Kuf Zayin. The Gemara in Kuf Hey. The Gemara in Ksubas Kuf Hey says as follows: there was a Rav called Karna. Karna lived in Bovel at the times of Rav or Shmuel. We've done the first Amiroim, one of the first sages of the Talmud. He lived in that Hardor together with Shmuel, and together were great Dayanim. He was called the Dayan of Bnei Goyla. Karna was such a judge. He was called the judges for the Jews in exile. That's who Karna was. And the Gemara says that Karna would take money from both parties. So Gemara asks, how can you take money to judge people? So the Gemara says that he's planning anyway not to say a lie. He's taking from both parties. So he's not going to lie. So the Gemara says, to lie, that's lo yisatem mishpot. If Karna was planning to lie, that's the first halacha, not to swing the case in favor of one of the parties. But since Karna was taking from both parties, he wasn't planning on swinging the case either side. So why is it forbidden to take from both parties? The Gemara says, because lo yisikach shoichad. Lo yisikach shoichad is taking bribes. And taking bribes, even if it's from both parties, while planning to give a just verdict, as well it's forbidden to take bribes from both parties. The Mefarish, the Hafloh, explains why. Why is it forbidden to take from both parties? Because lechoira, I'm not going to go in favor of either side. So what's the problem? So the Hafloh, it's in Omid Beis, Kofel Beis explains, because maybe the outcome of this case should be 100% in favor for one party to the 100% loss of the other party. But since both parties paid, so he will not go 100% against a one party, because he as well paid you money. So you will come to some kind of settlement, and then again there won't be justice. So even so, a person is planning to be just. I'm taking from both parties. Nevertheless, since you took money from people, even if you took from both parties, you may not give a 100% judgment in favor of one. You will maybe make a settlement in order that the other party shouldn't lose, because they as well paid you money. The The Gemara goes on to say, so therefore, why did Karna take from both parties? If it's forbidden, that's Lesikach Shoichad. Lesikach Shoichad means not to take from both, even if I'm planning to give a just judgment. Nevertheless, you may come to give a not just the judgment, as we explained. So why did Karna take both from both parties' money? So Gemara explains, because it is called Schar Batola. Karna was a very well-known professional wine. He knew to smell the wine that people had in the barrels, and he knew that this wine is soon going to go off. It's soon going to turn, so you should sell it fast. Or he would smell and say, no, you got still time with this wine. So people used to take Karna and pay him money to come and smell the barrels of wine. Then in those days, there were loads of barrels of wine. People were drinking wine a lot. So it was very well known. So Karna said, if you want me to come and judge your case, you're going to have to pay the loss, compensation for what the other money I would have got had I not taken your case. I would have earned money by smelling the barrels of wine. And since I'm losing that money as a compensation, then it was permitted for Karna to take from both parties' money. But this is the source, the Gemara, to explain that Lesikach Shoichad, stop to take money if it's not compensation. Even so, I'm planning to give a just verdict. And even so it's from both parties, nevertheless it's forbidden, because as we explained, B'Shem the Haflor, because you may not give a full verdict as it should be. The Gemara goes on to say that's the source of the name Shoichad. What bribery in the Torah is called shoichad. What does it mean, shoichad? Shoichad stands for shehu chad. You become one with a party. You think like him. You think of that party, of the way they need in the judgment, and therefore you will not be able to judge evenly both parties, because you already know Gea Bedovo, and since you took shoichad, you became chad, shehu chad. We became one. We became one. And the Gemara is mechad, can you become one with both parties? Because then you will make sure there'll be some kind of settlement and everyone will be happy. But that's the idea of shoichad. The Gemara goes on to explain with a story of Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yossi, he lived in Eretz Yisrael after the Churban Beis HaMikdash. In the times of Rebbe, he was known to be a very close friend of Rebbe HaKodesh, who wrote the Mishnayos, and he was a Rosh Hashiva in Tzipoiri. And Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yossi as well had fields in the north of Eretz Yisrael. And he had the oris. Oris is somebody who works by the field and is being paid by percentage of fruits you give him for the work that he worked on your field. And every Friday the worker would come to Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi and bring him the fruits that grew in the field. One week the worker came on Thursday. He came a day early, and Rabbi Shmuel said, why did you come early? He said, because I'm coming to you because I have a court judgment and I would like you to preside. And so I brought the fruits early because I'm anyway here. So I decided to give you the fruits. So Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi said, that's it, I'm exempt, I cannot judge anymore in your court, in your case. I will send you other rabbis to court for you. Because since you brought the fruits earlier than the time, so it's like a kind of favor. And that as well is included in shoichad. Shoichad can be in the smallest, insignificant hano a person may have got. It never can sway a person's mind. Shoichad doesn't mean $1 million. Even such a small thing that his worker brought the fruits a little bit earlier, nevertheless, he didn't want to preside. And the Gemara goes on, so he brought other rabbis who will judge that man, the worker's case. And then what happened was, he was listening outside. Rabbi Yossi was listening outside to the court case, and he was walking, pacing up and down the room, and he was saying to himself, the Oris could have said better. He could say like this, and he could have said like that, and he can bring this as a proof. And then he chapped himself, and he said, look, he just planned to give me fruits. And in the end I didn't accept the fruits, and the fruits are my fruits. And he just brought it earlier. And look how it swayed my mind, and now I wasn't any more objective. And standing outside, I was thinking to myself the different svaros, different ideas that this man could have said in his favor. So we see from these Gemaras the most amazing power that there is the inyan of bribery. Bribery, there is no amount. It can be the most insignificant amount. Nevertheless, a person anymore isn't objective. He becomes shochad. Shochad means shehu chad. He becomes one with that party. We even learned, even if the person is planning to give a just judgment, he's taking from both parties as well. He will make a settlement in favor of both parties. Only Karna took money because that was in compensation for the money he would have lost otherwise, because he had a job of smelling the barrels of wine. So as a compensation, then it was allowed for him to take the money. Now, what's very interesting, asks the Chazon Ish a powerful question. He asks, why, if Shochad is so powerful, and it can mamash make the dayan is not anymore objective, so therefore, why is it only the monetary laws, the halacha of Shochad, in Choshen Mishpat? But if you will look in Yoreh Deah and Orach Chaim, if the Rav, you want to go to the Rav to see if the cow that you shechted, you want to know if the lungs is not treif, you can take it to the Rav. And you can even may have given a present to the Rav, $100, $1,000. You invited him to your wedding. You may, and then you come to him with a shaila. There's no shochad. You can give a Rav a esrog to check if the esrog is kosher or not. And you may have given him money as a present for Yom Tov and say, hey, check as well my esrog for me. It's allowed. And the Rav can check the esrog. Hey, what happened with shochad? What happened with shochad? Can bring the Rav on sukkahs to your sukkah to check if it's a kosher sukkah. You give him money for the Chag, for Yom Tov, and then he can still paskin for you to see if the sukkah is kosher or not. Hey, what's happened with shochad? More than that, the Rav can paskin his own shailas. The Rav has a question, is my sukkah kosher or not? He can go out in the garden and have a look, and he can, yeah, it's kosher. He can paskin his own shailas. On the own animal that he shechted, he can check if it's kosher or not. If there's no treifus. What's going on? What's with shochad? We just brought a whole Gemara explaining how sensitive the idea of shochad is. And here when we look out of Choshen Mishpat, we go into Orach Chaim and Yoreh Deah, Issa v'Heta, there's no mention of shochad bichlal. So what's the pshat? Says the Holy Chazon Ish, in his Sefer Emunah Bitochen Perek Gimel, he says, if I try to see it inside, he says as follows. From here, this halacha of shochad we see that Hashem created the world. He fashioned this olam hazeh all according to the laws of the Torah. Like it says, Histakel bo'iraisa uboro alma. Hashem looked at the Torah, and according to the Torah, that's how He created the world. Not only the world as it is, but even our psychic thinking is wired according to the Torah. Because since the Torah brought the idea of shochad only in the din of Shoftim and judges, so therefore the idea of shochad will only affect you in money, in judgment, in the courtroom. But it will not affect you in Issa v'Heta, because the Torah doesn't say that shochad will blind the eyes of the Rav. It only said it will blind the eyes of the shofet, of the judge. So therefore, from this we learn histakel ba'iraiso bora alma. The whole nature of this world, our way of thinking, what affects us, why does it affect us, is all because the Torah says there will be shochad to the judges, so there's shochad by the judges. Even to such a minor little idea, a little bit of money you give to a judge, it can sway his thinking. But the Torah doesn't say that there's shochad in Issa v'Heta, so therefore there is no shochad. It will not sway the thinking of the Rov. So here we see from this a great idea that even if we look at halachos of the Torah, which we think we understand it, really it's a chok. It's something we don't understand. It's not just a civil law. The Torah says do not bribe the judges, like the laws of America and in England. They as well have laws. It's as well, it's illegal to bribe the judges, right? But nevertheless, the Torah as well. So people may think, we learn it in the Torah. We have the same law in the civil law. No, says the Chazon Ish. It's a law far beyond our understanding, because the proof is there are monetary laws, there's shoichad, and the Issa laws, there is no shoichad, because shoichad is beyond. Hashem saw there's such idea of shoichad. He created the world in a way where shoichad will affect us in monetary laws. Because the Torah says that shoichad will affect you. So do we really understand why shoichad affects us? No. Because that's what the Torah says shoichad affects us. That's why that's why we, in our world, we see that there is the idea of shoichad. And where the Torah said that there is no shoichad, so there is no shoichad in Issa v'Heter. So this is the idea we learn in everything else that we see. Let's say, for example, do not murder. We see, wow, murdering is such a terrible thing. Why is it so terrible? Because the Torah wrote not to murder. So Hashem created the world in a way where murder is a terrible thing. Had the Torah written that murder is a mitzvah, so Hashem would have created the world in a way the greatest kindness you can do to someone is to murder him. So that is, we can now understand all the civil laws we see in the Torah. We always should remember that they're really very holy spiritual laws. They have much spiritual depth to them. And this is a case, the Chazon Ish says we see, is from Shoichad. May we be zocher to have a wonderful Shabbos. Thank you very much for listening.